Can't talk about Pennsylvania history or U.S. history without talking about beavers. I'm here along Beaver Creek in Beaver Springs, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has tons of places named after beavers, but for a long time what we didn't have was the beavers themselves.
I don't know, maybe I've seen my beavers in the wrong place.
Early European colonists traded with the native people living in the area. One such trade would have involved beaver pelts to the Dutch colony in New Amsterdam in exchange for guns and gunpowder. This trade is a domino effect that leads to the U.S. Constitution. But to understand how, we're going to have to explore and learn more.
Nice beaver.
Thank you. I just had it stuffed.
Let me help you with that.
Beaver fever is sweeping across Europe. Broad-rimmed floppy hats made of beaver pelts are worn by Swedish soldiers during the 30 Years' War. These hats become a popular fashion accessory in Britain. Beaver pelt has unique properties that make it particularly excellent in hat making, and this trend would carry on for nearly a century and a half. But by the mid-1600s, European beaver populations were already nearly extinct. You can't get beaver pelts without beavers, so the Europeans turned to their new native friends. The market was insatiable. In 1700, 69,500 beaver hats were exported from English ports. Over the next 70 years, more than 21 million beaver and felt hats would pass through English ports alone, generating the modern equivalent of $1.68 billion. Native trapping quickly decimated animal populations in lands under their control.
They say there's few that go through them gates that come out again.
This led to the Beaver Wars, more than 75 years of conflict over rights to territory on hunting grounds. The Haudenosaunee Iroquois Confederacy expanded its territory, wiping out or integrating rival populations. Thanks to guns received in trade with Dutch and later English traders, the Haudenosaunee were able to use firepower to overrun populations and armies much larger than their own. They waged total war on their enemies. In at least one case, the unfortunately named Neutral Tribe, believed to have been completely eradicated by the Confederacy during this period. Other tribes were either scattered to the north or west, or they were integrated into the Confederacy. Bad trade deals with the French and the French involvement in supporting opposing tribes during the Beaver Wars would eventually lead to the Treaty of Grand Pas between the British, French, Iroquois Confederacy and roughly 40 other tribes in the Great Lakes region. This treaty helped to solidify the partnership between the Haudenosaunee and the British, and lead to their siding with the British during the French and Indian Wars that would come later. As a result of the Beaver Wars and the continued expansion of European settlements, the Iroquois Five-Nation Confederacy integrated the Tuscarora Nation as the Six Nation and a number of other tribes to become the League of Nations that the English negotiate land purchases with for this area. The democratic system of government practiced by the Haudenosaunee, with its forms of localized and national control, separation of powers, decree by consensus, and representative government, would be a direct influence on the framers of the U.S. Constitution when outlining the system we take for granted today. As Ben Franklin himself wrote about the Confederacy in a letter to James Parker in 1751, it would be a very strange thing if 6 nations of ignorant savages should be capable of forming a scheme for such a union, and be able to execute it in such a manner as that it has subsisted ages, and appears indissoluble, and yet that a like union should be impracticable for 10 or a dozen English colonies. And indeed, indissoluble it has remained. The Haudenosaunee is believed to have begun around 1450, and its form of representative democracy is still practiced by the Confederacy to this day, making it the world's oldest participatory democracy and a major influence on the United States of America, all thanks to the beaver. Thankfully for the beaver, it's not all bad news. Although they had been completely eliminated from Pennsylvania and most eastern states by the end of the 1800s, restoration efforts were started in 1917.
Is hope, dear? Lots of hope?
Oh, yeah, there's a right bit more than hope.
Starting with a breeding pair from Wisconsin released in a remote valley in Cambria County, PA, it's amazing they survived the logging industry, but that's a topic for another time. Over the next 7 years, approximately 100 beavers were brought in from Canadian live trappers and released in refuges across the state. By 1934, the population was large and stable enough to allow for trapping again. The practice continues to this day, but is closely monitored and controlled to ensure these keystone animals remain a part of the Keystone State for many generations to come.